Last week, Google appointed Preeti Lobna as its head of India operations. Lobna's appointment topped a fast-growing trend of women executives taking charge of the corner office at technology corporations across the country.
In other news, Salesforce India chief Arundhati Bhattacharya has been elevated as the head of its ASEAN region.
Sandhya Devanathan is all set to take over as head of Meta's India business.
Daisy Chittalapilli is now president of Cisco's India and SAARC operations.
This one's big. Swapna Bapit is now head of India and SAARC at Palo Alto Networks.
All this indicates a reversing of the long-held narrative of gender disparity at the highest echelons of the industry. Global companies are wanting to make all the right noises when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. But is this trend only amongst global tech giants? Are Indian IT and tech companies warming up to having women spearheading operations? What do the numbers reveal? Are GCCs more inclusive than Indian IT? How has the GCC boom contributed to women being appointed as heads of organizations? Does appointing a woman as head give an organization brownie points? What should IT companies do to stop being laggards? What is the workforce participation of women like in IT and tech companies? How many of them end up dropping out and at what level? Stay tuned as we pick the brains of an ace researcher and a brand and business strategy guru. It's Friday, December 27th. I'm your host, Dia Rekhi, and you are listening to Move Over Tech Bros only on the Morning Brief from the Economic Times. The elevation of women to leadership positions at global tech firms in recent years has grown rapidly. This was since the initial postings of Irina Ghosh as Managing Director of Microsoft India, Sindhu Gangadharan taking charge as Managing Director of SAP Labs India, Jaya Jagdish as Country Head of AMD, or Pratibha Mohapatra becoming the Managing Director of Adobe India. Global companies want to make a statement about attracting the best talent while also making no bones about having a woman at the top positions. The Global Capability Center or GCC boom in India has also helped women to assume more leadership positions. About 25% of the women employed in the technology sector are in GCCs, and this figure is expected to rise to about 27% by 2027 as per industry data. Whether it is Lalita Indrakanti, the CEO at Jaguar Land Rover Technology, or Gangapriya Chakravarti, MD at Ford Global Business Services, Eva James, the VP at Renault Nissan Technology and Business Center India, or Mamta Madireddy, MD of HSBC Global Service Centers, these are just a few examples of the women who spearhead operations on the tech side of some of the most well-known global brands. But despite the roster of women leaders at technology firms, they still account for just about 6.7% of executive roles in GCCs. This is even more pronounced at Indian IT majors that have very few women in leadership positions. Barring Roshni Nadar Malhotra, who is the promoter and chairperson of HCL Technologies, none of the other top IT services firms, be it TCS, Infosys, Wipro or Tech Mahindra, have ever had women CEOs. So there's still a long way to go until the glass ceiling is completely broken. So what is the way forward? Well, we ask Munira Loliwala, VP of Growth and Strategy at TeamLease Digital.
I think the most important thing is to look at constantly aspiring to change and bring the change that you're working towards. I think there's few women who aspire constantly to adapt to change, adapt to different styles of leadership, adapt to the different cultures of leadership, and also look at how they can develop more leaders. So this is one thing which is very important, and we need more women leaders to prepare more women leaders today. That's how we'll be able to bring the entire structural and organizational changes. And that's when we will be in real terms able to, fulfill our inclusive workforce aspirations.
Right. But, Munira, you've done quite a bit of work when it comes to comparing GCCs with traditional IT services companies. What is the trend there? Are we seeing that GCCs are able to have more women in top leadership positions, or is this sort of like a misnomer?
Yes, definitely. I think the direct answer is that you will find more women employees occupying business decision making roles, roles that require a lot of strategy, planning, and mentorship. However, this is not the concept of just the GCC as an organization or IT services as a company. Historically, if you look at women inclusion to the workforce, we look back to where today globally we are about 43% of STEM workforce participation by women. However, when you look at the actual workforce entering, only 50% or probably even less than that percent of women, which is close to about 23% of women, enter the workforce. We also had a challenge when we look at disciplines of between the STEM engineering of mechanical, electrical and civil, and you will find more women conveniently choosing electronics and computers as their subjects in STEM. There's a lot of change in the enrollment of women in electronics and the amount of women with electronics engineering entering the workforce. And similarly, you will find GCCs adapting to more women. So that's a cautious call that these centers or units have made where more women have been able to look at. The reason being that the processes, the work that is outsourced to the GCCs in India today are in an environment which can be done through automation, innovation, digital in a hybrid model, and more work can be utilized, which is why I think it is becoming favorable for more women to pick up roles in embedded engineering, design development, software, solution architecturing. They also do a lot of role in R&D design engineering. They also choose to come to the testing, the hardware, which are more field-centric roles, or rather, let's put it, which are more male-centric roles. So that's where the trend is that we've seen.
One of the striking things when I was going through, the data that you had sent me was about how, despite this whole GCC boom that we are seeing, the number of executives, women who are in executive roles in GCCs is about 6.7% as compared to IT services, which is at about 8%. And I wanted to understand if that is just sort of like because we've seen this GCC boom sort of really taking off recently, and whether you see GCC surpassing IT services significantly when it comes to women in leadership positions or not.
So global roles in the India GCC growth have surged remarkably. They've taken about a 19% growth since 2022 and expected to grow with about a further 19% by 2030. But in whole, if you look at the absolute number, you will still have more women as compared to the total workforce employed. So of the total workforce employed, let's say approximately a 1.92 million of workforce that is employed with the GCCs today. 25% is what you look at is employed in the tech roles. While the absolute number looks better than the IT services company, but as now more global roles start to evolve to come to India, more innovation, R&D, processing and functional outsourcing is now going to get outsourced to India. You will also see a spike in those roles. If there are approximately 20,000 plus overall roles that we are expected to see globally moving to India by 2030, you'll have about easily 4,000 to 5,000 roles that women will occupy, in top leadership positions within the GCCs. So the number will definitely change drastically in the next 5 years itself, is what we are going to witness.
When we talk about women CEOs, we've seen that global MNCs have been far more proactive in appointing women as, CEOs of their firms and as managing directors, country heads, whatever you may call it. Whereas in the IT tech services space, at least among the top players, it seems like barring Roshni Nadar Malhotra, none of them have really had women CEOs ever. So why are we lacking in that regard in Indian IT services? When we talk of the people calling the shots, your country heads and managing directors and so on.
I think there's no right answer to this, but let's look at what is the value arbitrage that the organizations will look at. I think this surround sound of creating a value arbitrage, of having a global woman leader for an Indian IT services company, with the presence of having mass talent, critical mass talent. We today still lack in having critical mass talent, and I think it circles back to my statement where I say that if 50% of the women in tech, in IT services organizations drop at the age of 30-35, and another 51% drop within the next 5 to 7 years, you can imagine what population of women are aspiring to move up the ladder. So one, I think we see a problem of the availability of critical mass talent. Second, we also see a challenge in terms of what is the leadership programs that the Indian GCCs or global GCCs are offering to women in development as compared to what the IT services companies are offering. Let's speak about the non-tech sectors. I mean, why can't there be a woman CEO for an automobile giant? Why can't there be a woman CEO for a pharma healthcare organization? So I think that's where the whole dynamics have changed. And in fact, today, at leadership and management roles, you will find some amazing women who are doing great jobs out there. We have a long way to go. Another 20 years for India will be constantly growth, development. It will not be disrupted by any global changes or economic changes that you foresee in any other parts of the world. But India is continued to grow. So that's where we will see the rise of more women employees.
One of the interesting aspects that you mentioned, and it's really, quite sad also, is how many women have had to drop out of the workforce for whatever reasons, right? Two parts to this question. Do you see that number reducing going forward? Do you feel that there are certain things that need to be done on the company side or by the government or anything that can aid this process?
One, yes, I think the numbers have started to reduce. So if you see the overall attrition at the mid-management level for women employees has reduced to a large extent, which is why you see more women moving up the ladder chain. So if you look at the 18% of women occupying the mid-management roles, this was about close to 12 to 14% 3 years back, prior to FY21, and this is now at 18%. Similarly, women at executive roles, leadership roles, which was about 11%, was just about merely 7%, and that's how you see the rise. So second is what organizations can do, or what the overall community, in together that needs to do, is that we actually need to constantly not educate but involve our male colleagues into sensitizing the whole aspect of women inclusion. I think the more amount of your male employees understand this and they create an ecosystem where there is a balance of both the genders equally, organizations today need to participate and do a lot of development in skilling women, not just skilling them in the role that they are performing, but prepare them for all the other roles where they are part of the organizational change, right? Every organization goes through a role change in 2 years, 3. Why can't there be a complete mechanism which will help enable more women pick up roles from a non-tech sector or unit to a tech unit? So if we start doing internal arrangements first, it'll be more easier to bring more women to job roles, more women to work towards. Look at the participation of women in the tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities and towns. I think you have some fantastic installed tech talent there that are women employees. They are far more commuted, they are far more enabled, they are far more available, they are more flexible, they are more adjustable, and they like to tasks which are talented, which are difficult in nature. So I think that's where we need to build a complete ecosystem. I think let's simply speak about equality in everything, where you as a woman would support more women and more male colleagues to come up the ladder. I think today that's where the world is.
Like Munira says, building an ecosystem is critical. An ecosystem not just for hiring more women talent, but also supporting them as leaders. And this is where a number of Indian firms fall short. Only when this happens can women leaders take bold calls and decisions confidently and independently. But what is in it for the company when a woman assumes the corner office? Does it help them to score some brownie points? Let's find out from brand and business strategist Harish Bijoor. I just wanted to start off the conversation with, what we've seen lately with Google appointing Preeti Lobna as their country head for India. We've seen a lot of tech giants, and when we speak specifically of big tech, we've seen Google and Meta both appointing women as their country heads. And we just wanted to get the conversation started about how you perceive these sort of appointments.
If I look at what's happening in this space, I think gender is so yesterday. And I do believe some of the big majors, particularly the big global majors with an India presence, trying to say that quite vocally. To an extent, what's really happening is the way things were in the past, not the same today. People are saying that, hey, listen, guys, it's a level playing field. And I do believe men, women, and them, all of them are going to operate on the same platform where just merit counts. And therefore, if you do see, women being at the top positions today, it's total merit speaking. And it's a great thing to be happening today.
But when you say gender is so yesterday, then what would you perceive as being the trend of today then?
I do believe gender has its negative issues within the Indian context. For instance, all of us get very excited when a startup or a global tech major, actually announces paternity leave, for instance, for fathers. And we say that, hey, this is a great thing. This is equalizing. But there are still gaps, and the gaps remain in the sense that, when a woman is actually having a child, there is this key issue to say that, hey, a pregnancy has been announced in my team. And if a pregnancy has been announced in my team, well, I need to be careful about what kind of projects I allocate to her. And that attitude is, again, so yesterday, but sadly, it's so today as well. Until that is erased, I think the gaps will remain. But today, I think we're really talking about global majors making the right noise. It's very correctionist. It is to say that, we've made mistakes in the past. I think we need to correct it. And this is a great way of correcting it. Women in general, however, do make great leaders, as all of us know.
Something you mentioned, which is interesting, is that it's the global majors who are being correctionist in a sense, or trying to be more diverse, inclusive, that sort of thing. What about Indian companies? Are we seeing that same thing spilling over there?
Okay, Dia, you're pushing me into a corner and you're asking me to answer. And I'm going to answer, however. Indian companies, not yet there, not yet. Because I still do believe it's a cultural thing, it's a mindset. Gender has been a big item on the Indian agenda. If you really look within the context of Indian companies, family-run companies, boards, you will find the presence of women to be very pathetic. But I hope what the global companies are doing in the Indian context, within India, is going to create a churn. Because a lot of women will want to be joining these global companies because they suddenly look up and say that, hey, look, this woman is actually the top boss in India. I too want to be that.
The other aspect that is, important in all of this is the GCC boom, I think. We are seeing that a lot of global GCCs are having their Indian executives and CEOs leading the charge in a sense. So how has the GCC boom in India really helped this entire sort of movement?
Oh, it's been a big boon because, GCCs have led fundamentally because GCCs are excellence centers which have been put together. And these excellence centers really, recognize just one thing, which is merit. And suddenly within the GCCs, you'll see a whole chunk of the populace, which is actually floating to the top, is a whole set of women. And that simply says that, merit is coming to the fore and these GCCs are leading. And these GCCs are not hesitant in putting women in front. The same thing happened in banking, in the banking industry in India decades ago. If you really looked at a whole bunch of women led and came out of that space, and you suddenly realize that, the best banking talent in India is women.
How much of an impact does it have on the brand today if you have, say, for instance, a woman leading the company, for instance? Do you feel there is a certain a positive connotation to having a woman if a company appoints a woman, for instance, to lead?
I think so. Well, this is something people don't talk about, but having a woman heading the organization right at the top means that you are an equal employer. Forget an equal employer, you are beyond that. You are somebody who recognizes merit to be equal across the genders. Having a woman on top heading a company is next only to having a third gender person heading a company, because that would be the ultimate, where you do say that, hey, listen, between the three genders that we speak about, I'm gender neutral.
But what are the challenges that you feel, crop up when you have a woman at the top and you don't have an ecosystem to support her?
Well, firstly, to get a woman on top, it's extremely important to first build the ecosystem. This entire thing is a laddering issue. You need to build the ladder first, and only then you can have the woman right at the top position. And that ladder building is a very important exercise. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes attitude. And this attitude actually flows not from the bottom, it flows from the top down. If you have 6 levels of leadership, extremely critical to say that, this business about being an equal opportunity player must be seeping through the 6th level, the bottom level first, then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One, of course, is convinced, one is CEO leadership, one is led by the board, one is led by investors from across the globe. One is the easiest. The level 6, cleaning it up, cleaning the staircase, bottom up is the task and the ask.
What about when we speak of the ecosystem and what can be done to really ease things up to build that ecosystem and to really clean up that staircase in that sense?
This level 6 that I talk about, it has to be attempted much before a person actually enters into the work environment. I think this language needs to come in at the level of our schools, our primary schools, our secondary schools, our higher education schools. Because, schools are the ones that teach you this attitude. And these schools are going to push it up into the colleges into the higher education institutions, our engineering institutions, let's say, our engineering colleges, our medical colleges, our research establishments, the biggest and best of them across. You enter any of these higher education centers, you will be told by people that there is a gender distinction. Why should it be there at all? And finally, when people enter into the working space, you have equality. And that's where, it's just talent, talent, and talent.
It's reassuring to see so many women leading the charge at global tech firms in India. It signals a positive shift, but no change can happen without a switch in mindset. We need to see Indian firms taking a leaf out of the global playbook. It's about time. Trends come and trends go, but hopefully this one is here to stay. While women claw their way up to the top, it's essential that we don't see women dropping out of the workforce. Also, this cannot be a trend restricted to tech, but needs to spill over to other sectors like manufacturing, which have traditionally been considered a male bastion. Organizations should find ways to not only help women work comfortably, but thrive as well. Not just women, persons with disabilities and those from the LGBTQ community must be given access and opportunity to move up in their careers. Only then are we truly talking about diverse and inclusive workplaces. Thank you, Munira and Harish. It's Friday, December 27th. I'm your host, Dia Rekhi, and you are listening to Move Over Tech Bros only on the Morning Brief from the Economic Times. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi, sound design by Indranil Bhattacharjee, executive producers Anirban Chaudhary and Arijit Barman. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. It streams on Amazon Prime Music, JioSaavn, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, ET's own audio platform, ET Play. Have a good weekend and wishing you and your loved ones a very happy new year from Team TMB. Looking forward to bringing you great episodes in 2025. Cheers.